The Backdoor GAA Podcast for 2023 is now brought to you by Steede Motor Group. For your personalised vehicle shopping experience, visit steedemotorgroup.ie.
So delighted now to be joined by Galway Minor football manager Alan Glynn, just to touch on his time in charge of the Galway Minors so far and reflect on the season just gone by for the Galway Minor footballers. The season has calmed down a bit now, just before the club championship gets underway. So it felt like perfect time to get Alan on and talk about the Minors year gone by. Alan, a very demanding season, I'm sure, with the Minors this year. Probably nice to get somewhat of a break now.
Yeah, I suppose when you're involved in any inter-county team, it's always going to have a demanding aspect to it. You know, it's fairly full on, and there's a lot going on. And the nature of minor is pretty unique in that you start with such huge numbers. You know, like every year for the last few years, we've had north of 150 players trialing at the very beginning, and that, you know, logistically takes quite a bit of work and quite a bit of effort. And then you narrow down the team and the squad, and then you get into your 30 or 35, and you're obviously, what happens with every other team is the same with ourselves, and it can be demanding, but I would say along with being demanding, it's a very, very enjoyable experience to be involved in such a setup as well, you know.
Just there, when you mentioned the numbers, and it's probably something people don't realise with the trials and everything, the number of players you have involved. Is that the toughest part of it?
It can be. I suppose, like every club and every young lad think that, and you know, whether rightly or wrongly, but you know, they think they have players worthy of being minor standard. Probably at under 20 or senior, it's more clear cut, you know, and it's more maybe obvious. The differential between players. So, like, I suppose just the logistics of getting a proper look at, I think it was 184, 185 this year, you know, logistically giving everyone a fair chance and a fair amount of game time is difficult, you know, and lads can be really good one day and maybe below that level the next day, and you know, how many chances can you give, and how many, you know, viewings can you do? And I suppose that what would be really important is the management team is trying to have a certain amount of prior knowledge built up, whether it be going to championship games. You know, we were able to watch the under-17 championship last year, and obviously the academies have a couple of squads picked in the north and the city west, which is also kind of helpful. But at that age, you know, the academies can finish in September, and the trials mightn't be for another 4 months. Young lads can do an amazing amount of development in the space of 4 months. So, you know, the picture can be different by the time January comes versus what was maybe selected in September. So you try and weigh up and gather information from all those places. The schools then is very helpful. You know what I mean? The junior championship was run pre-Christmas this year. So that proved informative for us as well, because you were able to see a few players playing in their natural habitat rather than a trial situation, which is not ideal. I've been at the trials now for a good few years. I don't know what the perfect solution is. I don't think anybody knows what the perfect solution is, but it's yeah, like, to answer your question, it is quite a difficult part of the whole thing, just logistically, and the numbers of players, and I suppose it's a good thing in Galway, you're dealing with high caliber and high talent, so narrowing down is very difficult, because you can have huge amount of numbers of players who are, you know, all in similar standard, and that's difficult coming to an end decision on that.
You mentioned 184 there, and it's something I never would have realised myself. I wouldn't have thought the numbers went that large for trials. Are you bringing that amount of number of players all together at once, or does it have to be split up across various days?
No, we'd probably split them up over the course of a weekend, you know, so you might have 3 games run on a Saturday morning, 3 on a Sunday, 3 the following Tuesday, you know, divide them up over the course of 2-3 weeks. That's how we did that, and I suppose after a week, you're able to narrow down to a smaller number, and have a more kind of focused look at lads that you want to have a look at. You wouldn't have 184 people landing at the same time. That'd just be disastrous stuff, really,
Just with that, you talk there about like junior championships and the post-primary level. You obviously know the majority of players from working in the academy, working with the Bish as well at senior post-primary level. You've been heavily involved at this level, but is there still a certain few players that might have come on your radar in this term as Galway manager that you might have been aware of before that?
Yeah, there's always one or two, like management and selection. Like a player might not just be suitable for a particular manager, or might not have been able to do themselves justice, I don't know, in their school squad or in a previous academy and not have got selected. And that can happen. No more than I'm sure there's tons of players who I haven't selected over the last couple of years who will go on to make great under 20 and great senior footballers. Young lads develop at different times and at different ratios. So I just mentioned to you there, an academy can finish in September, and what a lad goes and does between September and December or January can really have a really determining factor in making a minor squad 4 months later. And I don't underestimate that. 4 months seems like a very short period, but if a lad really applies himself and is really dedicated, they can, I won't say come out of nowhere, but they can maybe kind of surprise a couple of people and make a squad or subsequently make a team.
When you're talking about a player like that who can surprise someone, is there anyone within the minor setup under your term that jumps out when you think of that?
Put me on the spot there now, Paul. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone in particular, and I think we are talking about very young players at this stage, and I suppose it would be unfair of me to label somebody of that age that they were, surprised or came out of nowhere, but it definitely does happen.
Just with that, if we start just on this year and reflecting on it as a whole with the minor level, how do you look back on it? Like, have you got time to kind of assess it now and watch it back a bit?
Yeah, look, ultimately we didn't get to the levels that we would have wanted to get, or we didn't get to the levels that we felt the talent we had in the squad was worthy of, and we got to the last days in Ireland, which was fine. That would be probably minimum expectation for us and for what we had. We didn't perform definitely anywhere near our level against Derry, which is obviously still kind of raw, to be honest with you, and very disappointing. They're after going on and winning the All-Ireland on Sunday, and they're a really, really impressive team, right, and a really impressive squad, and they've shown they've played 10 games, won 10 games. They're very worthy champions. We just would have liked to have played better against them. We would have liked to have got closer to our standards that we were nowhere capable of. I would say if we go back to the game previous in the Connacht final, that's where maybe our season unraveled a little bit. We were not playing particularly well in the Connacht final. We were a point up at half time, maybe playing at 6 out of 10 of our level, and we went 2 up about 10 minutes into the second half, and we looked like it was going to be nip and tuck, but we looked like we were well in the game, and if we could get anywhere near our standard at all, we looked like we could have won it. Unfortunately, we had 5 minutes of just kind of a chaotic period. That can happen in minor, and we end up conceding 2 goals. So we went from 2 up to 5 down in about, I don't know, it was 6-7 minutes. We managed to get that back to 3 points, but we never really got back to within touching distance of winning that. And I think maybe we had a bit of a hangover from that, and maybe our confidence was maybe damaged a little bit from that defeat that kind of brought into Derry. And obviously, seeing what we've seen subsequently from Derry, we ran into a bit of a juggernaut of a team with Derry. When we were a little bit low on confidence, they were very high on confidence. It just came together at a wrong time for us to produce a performance that we wouldn't have been really happy with, you know.
I was down that game in Carrick, Alan. Just an awful day for football down there when you look at it. But is it fair to say that day anything that could have went wrong for your team just went wrong?
Potentially. You know, the biggest one maybe was the quality of the opposition. You know, that if we'd won a kind of final, you may have theoretically got an easier draw. Not that you'd be trying to avoid teams, but just for confidence building, we could have probably done without playing Derry. The conditions weren't particularly good, and I think we conceded 1-2 in the first maybe 7 minutes, and you could see maybe our confidence dropping a little. We had a couple of injuries going into that game, and then next thing, the one break we do make down the pitch, our midfielder gets injured and pulls his hamstring, and it's just like, you know, you're looking like, geez, what, as you said, what else could possibly go wrong here? But look, you have days like that, Paul, where you just don't perform to the level that you can, and that's disappointing, you know, because there's definitely a quality bunch of players there in that squad, and definitely they have a very promising future ahead of them. And I'd be thinking that they would be hopefully be able to make up for maybe the disappointment this year in future years with future Galway jerseys and going forward.
Yeah, as you talk there, it was 4 out of 4 for you in the Connacht group stage. Then obviously coming up short against Mayo and Derry having too much. But can you take positives from the campaign?
You can, like, I suppose when you're involved with minors, you've kind of got, well, as a management team, we had a kind of 2 goals. Was first and foremost try and develop players, right, and make them better players. That has to be when you're in, for me anyways, when you're working at under 20, under 17 or below, you gotta be trying to make players better, right, and trying to coach them and you know, bring them back to their clubs better than what they were when you got them. So I think we would definitely be happy from that point of view that the players that we selected, that we coach them to a very high standard and expose them to, you know, great expertise in terms of nutrition and strength and conditioning and sports psychology and video analysis and, you know, tactical awareness. I would say all of our players developed in those areas. The second part then, in terms of minor, is being competitive on the pitch and trying to obviously win something. If you can get the 2, then you obviously have a perfect season, and not everybody can have that. We had in the group stage, like, we started off up in Sligo. I think we were 2 down at half time, and we had a really powerful performance in the second half, and that brought us into Roscommon. We had a really good performance against Roscommon. We went up to Mayo, then to McHale Park to put us into the kind of final. We had a really good 1-point win, and probably that was our performance of the year when you look back at it. Out of the 6 games up in Mayo to win by a point, we played really, really well. And then we obviously had the Leitrim game, and that brought us into the kind of final. A couple of things went against us in terms of injuries. Maybe a couple of our key forwards weren't able to feature in the kind of final and the quarter-final.
Nearly similar there to the seniors, with their injuries that kind of impacted them. Like Jack Heenan and Sean Walsh, they were really 2 significant players on the spine of your team, you could say, that picked up those niggles. Yeah,
like, look at no more than seniors. If you're going to win, if you're going to beat good teams, if you're going to win anything of significance, you need a bit of luck in relation to injuries, and that bit of luck evaded us. When you looked last year, we were actually getting lads back from injury. You know, we were gaining players rather than losing them, and that gave us momentum. Whereas this year, just after that Mayo game, we picked up the couple of knocks in the group game. We picked up a couple of knocks, and that maybe we lost a bit of momentum and we lost a bit of fluidity in our team. You know, players probably who are used to playing with each other now are a little bit kind of new to each other in subsequent games, and it definitely had an effect on us. I think they were our 2 top scorers in the 4 games that they were playing. So, you know, if you take the top scorers out of any team, you're going to feel that loss. Notwithstanding that, I still go back, and 40 minutes into that kind of final, we were decently positioned, albeit not playing all that well, and we it's kind of one that we maybe left behind us a little bit, I think.
And just with that, like I know that all these players are still at such a young age, but you don't want to be like singling out players that are gonna push on. But like a lot of your players who were there last year, the likes of Ross Cohn, Shane McGlinchey, even Owen Kelly, who was coming on, came back from injury this year as well, Charlie Cox. They're all players you would expect to push on to under 20 because they did play some great football this year.
Yeah, like when I look back over the course of the last few years, you can definitely see really good talent in the minor squads. Like, we're very lucky in many ways in Galway. You're dealing with some really well-run clubs, you know, who send players in at under 14 or under 15 or under 16 academies who are well coached and they're maybe ahead of the curve. And then we're also really lucky in that you've got some really good schools. So when the club season finishes, they obviously go into the school system and they're continuing on the work that has begun at club. And I think just for Galway, I suppose, as a county as a whole, when you've got a strong club system and a good school system, that augurs very well. To start, I suppose, pinpointing players with potential, I would say every player that has passed through our hands has huge potential to go play under 20. You know, they wouldn't be on a minor squad if they didn't have talent. You also have lads who will be maybe later developers who maybe weren't as good as others at under 17, but by the time they get to under 20, they'll definitely be as good. The key for these young players is, do they have the commitment and the discipline, you know, to take on board all of their learnings from club, from academy, from if they were involved in intercounty with ourselves the last couple of years, and can they apply that to themselves and rigorously pursue, you know, a goal of playing under 20? That's the key thing. And I suppose you're looking at then lads' character. Do they have the character to do that, and do they have the ability maybe to avoid distractions that are coming down the line with them? And that will bring the cream to the crop, I should say, at under 20 level down, you know, the next couple of years.
Were you happy with those players who maybe took on a leadership role that you could see within their second year minor in the Galway minor setup?
Yeah, well, I think it's always helpful when you get a chance to work with guys for 2 years, because you're not, you know, starting from scratch, and maybe they know the standards that you'd be hoping for within a squad, and they, you know, maybe know the general style of play. So I think that's always helpful when you get to, the longer you get to work with players, they know, the more they know our coaching team and our management team and how things are done, and they can certainly, that's a very beneficial thing.
You talked there about developing players and bringing them through, and even you hear, like, even people involved in Galway minor hurling have said it, that their most important thing is to bring minor players and bring them through to under 20 and bring them through to senior. I feel like that's the goal of every minor setup, really. But how can you achieve that? Like, that's obviously the main goal straight away. Is that what you focus on straight away, rather than talking about titles or anything? As straight away as when players come in?
Well, I said to you earlier, Paul, like you've two aims really when you're in, certainly in a minor management, right? You can't turn around and say the first and foremost way we're going to determine success is if we win a Connacht title or win an All-Ireland, because chances are you may be disappointed on that front, right? Nobody really is going to remember a fantastic minor footballer. You know, they may remember for a period of time a really good under 20, but senior is where it's at, and these are development ages really, and it's what it is for us anyways, is a developmental stage, exposing them to maybe levels of expertise and all the different facets I already mentioned, that they may gain 2 or 3% in a number of different facets of play, a number of different areas of their life, which they can build on then at under 20 and hopefully make it to senior. You know, you don't get to senior just, you know, by getting to age 21 and say, oh, I'll put in a tough couple of years here and you know, I'll get into a senior squad. Really, you know, it's a kind of a process that you have to work on over a number of years, and it's like maybe building a house. You know, you start with the foundation and build upwards from there. That's the way we see it. Certainly in our setup, like, you would be very proud. We'll say the likes of Daniel Flaherty and Killian O'Curry were in the Galway senior squad this year. They were two minors who came through during
You
COVID.
obviously you worked with them in your first year in charge as minor manager, but is that someone you can refer to now as an example and a platform for Galway minor footballers to look at these two who've played minor and they're in a senior setup now?
You could do, but like, I don't know the stats, but I suppose you could go through that Galway senior squad and probably a huge cohort of them played either minor or under 20. I'd be surprised if there were many that didn't play either of those levels. So there are probably young lads nowadays are probably looking at someone in their club or someone in the neighbouring club or someone who went to their school and saying, well, this is what he did and look where he is, and that's something to aspire to. But having the likes of Killian and Daniel and see them progress to get to the level that they are is part of the process. That you spoke there about development versus winning. Ideally, you do both, all right? But your number one priority in a developmental aspect, and that's from 14 to 20, is to prepare lads, like we just mentioned there, that they can make as quick and as easy transition to senior as possible.
Yeah, it's nearly a thing, isn't it? People talk about development, but with development, then, as you said, nearly like anyone who's in a minor setup, management or players wants to win.
Of course, I think, look, ideally you can do both. Ideally you can do both, and winning is a great habit for a county, and supporters and clubs like to see winning Galway teams. That I'd be very surprised if you got anyone to say to you, well, all we care about is development and we want to lose every game. That just is not, for me anyways, that's not realistic. If you can get a healthy balance between development and trying to, perform on the pitch and getting lads to perform, then the winning should, follow from that.
Yeah, even before that, like as we mentioned, there was a lot of players before Daniel O'Flaherty and Killian O'Curry on, like if you look at previous minor setups that have come through. But from your own point of view, from working with those two players at minor, can you look at satisfaction when Dave came from minor into senior panels now?
Yeah, you can do, but you'd have to remember that them playing minor is a very small part of their development, especially those two, because they actually played in 2020 and that was in the middle of COVID. So I'd say if we had 10 or 12 sessions in the whole of 2020, we would have been doing well and played 2 games. So can't take any credit for them, right? Because that was a kind of a mess of a year. But they're like any Galway player who's at senior, the bulk of the work is always done by club and by school and by academy, and it kind of progresses from there. And without those, and that's what I said to you earlier, those building blocks within a county, and we are very lucky in Galway that we've got a lot of very well run clubs with a very good coaching system. They're what are producing the players, and then at maybe an inter-county setup, you're fine-tuning or you're making little 2 or 3% or improvements in various facets to maybe bring them on another little bit.
Just when you mentioned COVID there and the 2 games and the 10 to 12 sessions, I presume you've never had a stranger experience as a manager.
No, I suppose we didn't, that was just a mess of a year when thinking back. I think I took over in January 2020, and we started into the trials, and so we had a ton of numbers. If you remember, we had been in the 2 previous minor All-Irelands, so being a Galway minor was a very popular thing that time, and still is, I suppose. But we had a lot of interest in getting on the squad in 2020, and then it got to around Paddy's weekend, I think the lockdown hit, and I'd say we had about 44 players still on our books at that stage. This was a time when championship was later, so championship was not due to start, I think, until the middle of June. So we, now it starts in April and May, but it was different back in 2020. And so then we had to move on to the online sphere. This is where we found Zoom, which we're on now, you know, when everything moved to online. So the lads were in school in Zoom, if you remember. And we were trying to do like gym sessions over Zoom, and we were trying to give them running programs and trying to give them skills programs, and they'd be sending us videos and that kind of thing. And that was just, you know, bonkers. And in the middle of that summer, then we got a little bit of a break. I think we were back for maybe a week. We got 2 training sessions, and then everything closed down again until about, I don't know when it was, must have been October, where we got maybe a week's notice that we were playing, and we could train. That time, there was no dressing rooms. You couldn't get a bus to a game, and it was at the height of the real restrictions. I think there was 50 people allowed in the ground up in Beacon. So it was I suppose a very unique kind of an experience, to say the least, and not a nice experience, you know. But one thing I will say is our biggest thing that time was just giving the lads a chance to play for Galway was probably our number one priority. And there was talk that time the competition's going to be cancelled. I know, like, school All-Irelands were cancelled, for example, that year. And so it was just making sure that these lads got an opportunity to play, and they did get it. The competition ran off. I think we played Leitrim in the first round, and then things shut down, and I think it was about the week before Christmas. Again, we got 7 days notice, and we played Roscommon and lost, and they subsequently played, I think, was it St. Stephen's Day or the day after St. Stephen's Day, they played the Connacht final. So it was a mad time, and not anything I would wish to go anywhere near again, because when you're trying to run a team and trying to get teamwork and team ethic kind of into lads, that wasn't obviously the ideal scenario or situation to be working in.
Obviously, that's a strange experience, but to take it down from, probably, it's obviously the most special year for you, the most standout year when you do win the All-Ireland last year. When you look back on that, it's probably something I'd say everyone says to you about that All-Ireland. To lose to Mayo, to play Mayo 3 times, lose twice, and then win once, like that's an experience in itself too.
Yeah. Again, speaking of strange, I suppose that would be very strange that would happen in a given year, where the same 2 teams would end up playing each other 3 times. But, like, I suppose we knew in 2022 that we had quite a talented team. You know, you could tell from quite early on that.
Was an All-Ireland on the agenda? Will it be mentioned, or is that something you just?
It wouldn't have been mentioned. I think it would have been a little short-sighted of us to go talking about All-Irelands to, 16 and 17-year-olds. But I suppose you get a feel for what's the potential in a team quite early. And that year, I suppose, just the way lads were developing, and the way lads were training, and the way they were responding to what was being thrown at them. And, we played some good challenge games against some good teams that season. We had a fair idea that we were, maybe at the upper end of ability-wise in Ireland. What we didn't anticipate was maybe realising that Mayo were equally at the same level as us, when I just think back, we had 2 blistering games really in the first 2 rounds against Sligo and Roscommon. We kind of, blew them out of the water a little bit. And maybe we got a little bit ahead of ourselves, and we ran into Mayo in Tuam Stadium, who gave us a bit of a hocking, if we're honest, in the group game, which put us into a semi-final against Sligo, which we won again. And then that put us against Mayo again in the kind of final. And I suppose we improved from the group game in terms of our performance, but Mayo didn't really drop their level from the 2 games, and they still managed to beat us. But I even think, even getting better in that game, we weren't distraught, or we weren't really downtrodden after that defeat, because I suppose we still had the knowledge that we were a really, really good team, and obviously so transpired after that.
The character and resolve to come back after losing to a team twice, and like sometimes with minor football you just don't know, because a lot of it can be on the day and stuff. But to see a group that day, a real mature performance, even for yourself, having a child and winning an All Ireland on the same weekend as well was definitely something that you don't see all the time.
No, yeah, that was a Carlsberg week for me anyways. This time last year for sure. That's not something that you'd be lucky enough in your life to tick those two boxes off in the space of a week. But like after that kind of final was on a bank holiday Monday, and we were drawn against Dublin the following Saturday, I think it was, up in Tullamore, and we'd only 6 days to prepare. And in hindsight, maybe that was a brilliant thing for us, because we didn't have time to dwell on losing the kind of final. We didn't have time to think about it. And Dublin at that stage had, I think, the closest any team got to them in Leinster was 9 points, including the Leinster final. So that was like, no more than Derry this year. That was like a juggernaut coming at you the following week. And our lads just performed brilliantly in that game. We went 4-0 down in the first half very early, and we missed a penalty early on as well. And things were looking not great, and we slowly just ground them down, and we ended up going in, I think it was 6-4 at half time, and winning a real dogged game 10-7. And when we beat Dublin, that the lads just were, it was really on then, it was really on. And that brought us to Derry, and there was a good few of the lads playing this year that were played against us last year as well. We were, I think, 8 up maybe with 8 minutes to go, and we did our best to blow that game late on, and we just scraped by a point. I remember, I think their last attack, their goalie was up, and they had a shot out on the left hand side that just dropped wide. I've never so happy to see a ball drop wide in my life, which obviously got us into the final then,
From that year, and you like so many standout players there too that you'd expect now heading into 2024 that you'll probably see some of those players featuring for the 20s. But are the structures there, do you feel, as minute even you touched there with Satanta now coming in with the development squads, but do you feel the structures are there at the minute for these young players to thrive and succeed?
I would like to think so, Paul. I would like to think so. I think Galway is ahead of the curve in terms of development. I think it's number one is getting the right people involved. And when I see the caliber of coaches involved in our academies, when I see the likes of Ducky and when I see Port Joyce and the setup that they have there, you would hope that the personnel are there to help players develop. The next thing is maybe the expertise in terms of strength and conditioning, in terms of nutrition, in terms of sports psychology. With Satanta, as you mentioned, working now this year with the academies, you'd hope that the expertise is there to help guys develop. I know in our own management setup, I was delighted with the caliber of people that we had involved over the last couple of years with our guys, and I know our minors would definitely have benefited from the management team, the coaches that were there and the experts that were working with us. And I know a lot of that are involved with Ducky's team as well. So I think structurally we're in a good place. And as I alluded to, I think twice already, your club and school system also plays such a key role. And so you're looking at the three aspects working in tandem. And I'd like to think that the intercounty, the club and the school in Galway is definitely a good environment for our young lads to be developed and to become as good a players that they possibly can. They're not found for wanting for anything in Galway. I don't think. What's key now, and you were asking me about the development from under 17 to 20, is maybe how much lads want it themselves, how disciplined they are, how willing they are to maybe forego distractions in the pursuit of performance. And that's a massive one now,
Is that a thing where, like, in the next year or two now, it's nearly, obviously the players will get a huge amount in strength and conditioning and in a setup, but some of it does come down to what they're going to do themselves off the pitch?
Yeah, like you look at any team, whether it be intercounty or club or school, there's a finite amount of time you can train. like we could get Loch George this year, 3 pitch sessions, and the odd time we did a group gym session, mostly did the gym on their own. But you're talking maybe 8 hours in the week, and so what you're relying on then is our guys getting the 8 or 9 hours sleep a night, I should say. Are they fueling themselves in the correct way with their 3 meals and their 3 snacks, and hydrating themselves? Are they recovering? Are they maybe avoiding distractions? Are they taking time for themselves away from football? All of these things are very influential in terms of an inter-county footballer, and it's a lifestyle, and it's a great lifestyle, and it can be really good fun, right? And it can also be challenging at the same time. As I said, a lot of the work can be done maybe away from the pitch itself, or the group setting. We would say it might be guys working on technical aspects at home, or doing a little bit of extra gym work, or being really disciplined in the areas that I spoke about in terms of nutrition, or that. They're the little maybe 1%ers that separate your really, really good club player from an inter-county player, and they also separate an inter-county squad player from a really, really good inter-county team player, who's someone who's maybe on the starting team and performing really, really well. So there is a lot to it, and within all of that, then you need a little bit of luck too, and you need to be able to avoid injuries is obviously crucial, and that's why I suppose your rest and recovery for young lads, getting that right is equally as important as training hard.
What's giving you the bug for management, Alan?
That's a good question. What's giving me the bug? I probably started managing young. I enjoyed it. I managed in my own club in St. Michael's. I managed a minor team when I was still playing senior football for Michael's myself, and I did that for a couple of years, and I enjoyed it, and I liked it, and I continued that. I did maybe 3 or 4 years managing the under-21 team, and then obviously the nature of my job, you're kind of managing every day in school. You're managing a classroom. Every day is like a microcosm of managing a football team. And obviously you'd be managing in the school, the various school teams as well. So I suppose it feels nearly normal to me now. I can't put a finger on what exactly motivated me or what got me involved, but definitely what keeps me sustained or keeps me motivated in continuing managing, continuing coaching, is just being involved in great environments with great people. And I've been blessed the last couple of years to be involved in brilliant management teams with the Galway Minors, and dealing with really great coaches and experts, and I found that very good experience for myself, and I found it very educational for myself. And at the same time, dealing with young players who are sponges for information and who want to develop, and some of them, if you told them stand on their head for 24 hours, that'll make you a better player, they would. Dealing with that level of enthusiasm is very, very satisfying.
Does minor make it nearly enjoyable for you? Because it feels like at minor level, when you're talking about a manager, that there is a mix there of coaching on the field and managing. When you maybe compare it to inter-county senior level, for instance, the manager really just kind of does manage.
Yeah, well, I suppose that every manager would have their own different style, no matter what age group that they worked with. I was confident the last couple of years that the coaches that I had, Tim and Mihal and Neil, in terms of the pitch, and we had Jack and Mike in strength and condition, I was confident that these were all experts in their field, and you could trust them to do a really excellent job, and they did do a really excellent job. At the same time, I suppose when you're manager, you're obviously managing the administrative side of things, but you have to have a hands-on role from time to time on the pitch and in meetings and that type of thing. So it's kind of getting a hybrid, and it's getting a healthy balance of having and trusting really excellent coaches to do their job, and maybe leading the boat to go in the direction that we all want, and make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. It's maybe a hybrid of the two is the ideal scenario, but being able to have good people is a a really good start and really good help.
If you're to look at it, what's your goal in management over the next few years for you?
I suppose it's just to get as good as you possibly can, Paul, and gather as much experience as I possibly can, and expose myself to as many and as big a challenges that I can. That would be the goal for me, and to see how far I can go in management, and what teams I can get involved in, and can I improve as many players as possible under my tutelage. That would be my goal.
Would senior intercounty level be a goal?
Look, I'm a long way from thinking in terms of those terms, to be honest with you, Paul. That's far off distance for me.
Very interested. I should ask the question, but as you said there, you can take some positives from the minors. Yeah, if we are just to look at it, because the club championship is approaching now somewhat, but just from your own club's perspective, when you were there in 19, you ran my column really close that year. There's been positives, even last year, getting to a quarter-final as well, coming up short against Down, league semi-final this year. It does kind of feel like things are up in Michael's at the minute, are on an upward trajectory.
You'd like to think so, Paul. I'd be optimistic for the lads this season. I think they have a really good start, in that they've got an excellent manager in Colm Tumman, and he's in his third year there, so they've got really good continuity, and that's important, because at club level, a lot of clubs can jump season to season and nearly start from scratch with a new manager. So that's a positive. They have a minor championship winning team from, is it 2 or 3 years ago? Those players are starting to come into the squad and start to be leaders in the squad. They got to a quarter final, as you said. Last year we're probably a little bit unlucky to lose Down. Semi-final of the league this year had some really good, strong results there. Be optimistic that they can make a right good go at this year's championship and see where to take them. I think it's done more in the first round, and obviously that's a crucial game to get off to a good start. More intermediate champions, they'll have their dander up from winning an intermediate championship last year, so that should be a good game. Two good teams, and you'd hope if you can get over that puts you on a bit of a roll then for the rest of the group.
Like, it really is going to come around so quickly, and it's just so hard to believe we're actually already talking about club championship. But there's a narrative already kind of building that there's a big four this year, and that they're going to be hard stopped. The big four in Kerfin, Salthill, Montpellier, Milan, Mike Cullen. Now, there's going to be a lot of other clubs that want something to say about that. But if we are to look at from an outside kind of things, those are kind of four teams who are jumping out. If they don't potentially meet each other in knockout stages and they all get through the group, there are four teams on the outset that you're expecting to reach semi-finals.
Yeah, like you don't know, I suppose, with lads gone to America, with injuries, with maybe lads immigrating, things can change very quickly. But you would probably say, just looking at the caliber of players in each of those four clubs, and maybe in terms of form, right, over the last couple of years, your Montpellier, Salthill, Kerfin, and Mike Cullen look to be the four strongest on the outset at the moment, right? That can change very quickly, but it's really heartening, I suppose, in Galway to have such a competitive championship. There are clubs maybe just below that level who would really fancy their chances on any given day against the likes of those four, you know. So that promises and augurs well for a really competitive championship ahead. And like you look at the county final last year, Salthill and Mike Cullen, you know, that could have went either way in the last few minutes, and Mike Cullen came out. And it'll just show you the standard of, I suppose, Galway senior club football. Mike Cullen then went on and won the Connacht, you know, and they were unlucky in the All-Ireland semi-final, not to go one step further. But I would say Mike Cullen probably have the bit between their teeth now and are thinking, you know, we crossed a major step winning the Connacht last year. They'll definitely be, I would suspect, going all guns blazing to top their group, get into a quarter final, and try and progress as far as they possibly can in the whole All-Ireland series as well.
Is there any clubs that you can see spoiling the party with them big four, and you talk about is teams that come out of the blue, or a club that you think could have a big year this year?
It's very early to say, Paul, right? Like the league is the league, and it's played without championship players. So that it's difficult to assess. You know, we're 2.5 weeks out from championship. It's very difficult to assess who might be a dark horse based on league form, because that's, to me, not a very true reflection of where clubs are at. Like Mike Cullen had 9, I think, was it in the Galway senior squad this year, you know, so they're down 9 players on their league squad. So even if you were looking at results that they got or teams that played against them, it's not a proper reflection of what's to come. I think, you know, that first round is on the weekend of the All-Ireland Senior Championship final. I think it's the 29th of July. Once you see the first round of championship, and maybe even 2 weeks after that, once you have a couple of rounds under your belt, you'll be able to make a fair assessment, I think, of maybe a so-called dark horse, and maybe a team outside of that 4 that we mentioned having a right good cut at the championship. You couldn't rule out some of the clubs in Galway getting 2-3 wins under their belt in a group stage, getting into a quarter final and taking out one of the so-called big guns. You could definitely not rule out that. I just think making a fair assessment of it at this juncture would be a little bit foolish on our behalf, because we have to see what happens now in 2 weeks, and definitely in a month's time, after there's 2 rounds of championship, I'd say we'll be able to sit down and see, you know, we'll have a fair indication at that stage who's who in the Galway Senior Championship this year.
With that though, my Cullen, you expect they're going to be a team to beat there, as you talked about their achievements last year, and the introduction of Johnny Maloney as well from Offaly just strengthens a squad that already had that depth.
Yeah, they're not getting any weaker, certainly. You know, they're not getting any weaker as into this season. Like Mike Cullen are a really impressive team, and you know, the style of football that they play, they have dished out a couple of fairly significant hammerings in group stages, and even in some knockout games over the last couple of years, and probably no team will fancy playing them this year. Even, you know, when you add the addition that you just mentioned there, that makes them even stronger. For Mike Cullen, the key will be keeping lads, I suppose, injury free and keeping lads hungry. You know, have they got lads who maybe really want to go at it again this year and you know, win another Frank Fox and go on another run like they did last year. And I would say Mike Cullen are a very ambitious club, and they're really well ran structurally, and they are a really well coached team. So I would say they're not going to, it's bad news for the rest of the Galway to say they're not going to let the foot off the gas this year, and it'll take a hell of a team to stop Mike Cullen, and I would nearly go as far as say is whoever knocks Mike Cullen out will probably win the championship this year.
So Mike Cullen for Frank Fox?
Well, I'm not a betting man, Paul, but if you were to pin me to say who were to be the favourites, I would say, to cover myself, those 4 teams are in with a really good chance, and probably no one could really argue that Mike Cullen look to be the strongest. But if you were the semi-final of Mountbellew, Mike Cullen, Currafin, Salthill. I wouldn't be surprised to see any 2 out of those 4 to go through to a final, you know. What's really exciting for me is that you've got such a level of club team in Galway that be guaranteed going to club games again this year, like last year and over the last couple of years, to watch brilliant teams, really well coached, playing really good football. That's exciting for us all football people, I think, in Galway.
Yeah, it is really something though, the club championships to look forward to now, isn't it? Even if you look at the Galway senior squad, there's such a spread of clubs in there at the minute, and there's players coming from various clubs that mightn't have got a look in before, even if you're looking at some of the under-20s that got called in. But 2.5 weeks, as you said, and even the way the groups are kind of lined out this year, like I know that Michael's group is obviously the group of death, but like it's really a championship to look forward to now, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah, definitely, and like it's coming in 2 weeks, and you've got a game every 2 weeks, so there's great momentum, and there's going to be great excitement, and they've brought down the number of teams over the last couple of years, and that's probably made every game and every group competitive, you know, and that can only be positive. That probably brings up the standard, because clubs now are maybe worried about getting relegated, and so they have to make sure that they have everything in order, and you know, you can't afford one bad year or one bad season now, because you're you know, potentially putting yourself in danger of going down to intermediate, and that can only be beneficial, I think, for players, because standards will have to rise, because there's that nervousness that, you know, the trapdoor is there, and like the intermediate championship is a very difficult place to find yourself in now as a club, and it's a very difficult competition to win.
You're still fighting away this weekend, Alan, for the St. Michael's Juniors?
I am indeed. Yes, we are playing Claregalway on Saturday evening in the Westport semi-final, Paul. So yeah, very much looking forward to playing that game.
Do you still enjoy it?
Absolutely, yeah. You look at playing football with your club and with your friends. There's not many things in life that are as enjoyable as that in terms of sport. So I wouldn't be down playing if I didn't enjoy it. You know, I probably can't run as fast or not as strong as when I used to play, but yeah, look at junior is a nice no pressure place to play, and it's very enjoyable, you know.
That's really great to see you still going strong. That is all we have time for on our show today. Massive thank you to Alan Glynn for coming on. Great to get insight into the development of players, the Galway Minors setup, and what they've achieved over the last few years. And as we were saying there, club championship 2.5 weeks away. Some massive games to look forward to, and those fixtures, times and venues, I'm sure will be released in the next week or two, which will whet the appetite. But that's all we have time for. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. But that's all we have time for. Thanks a million, Alan.
Thank you, Paul.